even beyond that, that's a piece of advice I always give is just don't get wrapped up in those numbers. They're out of your control. What's in your control is the value that you provide. And if you're not providing value, those numbers aren't going to go anywhere anyway, because eventually people hear that you're just giving them crap.
Yeah.
And you go, well, guess what? There's another podcast right next to yours in the search I just did.
Yep.
Let me give them a whirl.
Yeah.
So focus on the value that you deliver and then let the numbers fall into place.
Downloads are a vanity metric in all
100%
shapes. I mean,
right.
and like I rarely look because, to be honest with you, if I had 0 listeners, I'd still be podcasting because I like to do it. I like to share my stories and I like to give value. So if it's the same thing when I was in a band. We'd show up to a show and we'd play for 3 people, and we'd show up to a show and pay for 1,500, and it was the exact same show both times because it didn't matter who was there. We're going to give them the right of their life. And I apply that to podcasting. And I do look at my numbers. I do look at specific things like completion rates, but I don't care. It doesn't bother me. If I have 50, 1,500, it's great, but it doesn't define me as a creator, right? Like I'm creating to create, not to collect some vanity thing that I can spew on Facebook groups everywhere. I have 5,000 downloads. Who cares?
Right. Who cares? I compare it to someone that's, if you're signed up to give a presentation in front of an audience, and let's say you have 20 people in the room for that presentation. Well, then the next day you're giving that same presentation and you've got an auditorium of 1,500 people. Are you going to give a different presentation for the 20 that were good enough to come because it's a smaller room? No, at least you shouldn't. You should be giving the exact same presentation because it's your creation. It's something you obviously believe in, and it's something that you feel is going to benefit anyone that hears it, whether it's 20 people at a time or 1,500 people at a time. So keeping that in mind, can you again look at those numbers and say, all right, I'll come back to these next month. It's like my dad always tells me, check your stock portfolio once a month, because you can't control it. Unless you're day trading and making a lot of changes to your investments, then let it play out and let your advisor do the work for you.
Yeah.
And that's how I look at this too. Why bother going to these numbers when my focus is on the value that I create?
The other problem with stats is that people go check their stats right away on an episode, and they think that check is what defines the episode. But podcasts are evergreen, and you have no idea that the podcasting culture goes back when they find a podcast they like and they go back and listen to those other episodes. So I don't think of my podcast episodes as like the be all end all. It's a library of content that people can get whenever they want. And those numbers are going to grow over time as I build that library, but they're never a static number, right? It's like, yes, you can look right away at your podcast stat, but that's just a snapshot in time. Doesn't define the episode. And I even challenge people when they're like, yeah, I only get 100 downloads. I'm like, well, could you imagine that 100 people showed up in your living room every week to hear what you had to say? You would, you'd crap your pants because that's a lot of people. And they're like, oh yeah, I guess it is sort of a lot of people. Yeah, it's a lot of people.
Anyone running a network marketing or MLM company, if they got those kind of returns on people coming to listen to them, holy shit, they'd be all over it.